Yo, what's going on, y'all? It's Cone back here again today with another video, and today I'm going to be predicting the entire 2024-2025 NBA season. We're just a week away from opening night, so you know me, I've got to get my predictions in, and we're doing everything, every single major award, where every team is going to land 1 through 15 in both conferences, some stat predictions along the way, what we're going to see in the playoffs, who is in the Western and Eastern Conference Finals, and ultimately, which two teams face off in the NBA Finals, and who will be lifting the Larry O'Brien Trophy at the end of 2025. Last year, I got it right with the Boston Celtics winning it all, so we'll see if I can repeat that feat again. There's a lot to get into, so we need to jump right into it. First of all, though, leave a like and subscribe if you enjoy. Hit the notification bell so you don't miss out on future videos, and please let me know what predictions you have for this season down below in the comments, and which of my predictions is your favorite and your least favorite. Let's get into it. Let's kick things off with the standings. I'm going to begin with the 15 seed in each conference. I move up to the 14, 13, 12, 11, and so on and so forth. Beginning in the Western Conference, for the 15 seed, I have the Portland Trailblazers. To the surprise of probably nobody, this is most people's pick to finish last in that Western Conference. They do still have some interesting talent like Jeremy Grant, DeAndre Ayton, Robert Williams. They brought in Denny Avdija, still have Anthony Simons, Shaedon Sharpe. They have Donovan Kling in there now. It's not a wholly untalented team, but it's just the least talented team in the Western Conference at the moment, and there's no incentive for them to be beyond this 15 spot. They would love to get Cooper Flagg to put him in as that solidified franchise cornerstone going forward. The rebuild has just begun. They have no reason to win games, so the Blazers could maybe shock some people early on in the season, but by the end of the year, I'm sure they'll have some kind of fire sale, and they will be at the bottom of the Western Conference standings. Over the Eastern Conference, there's two teams I've gone back and forth on, and I think ultimately, I'm going to settle with the Washington Wizards as the last seed. They've just looked so bad so far in preseason. It's very early stages of their rebuild. They're really going through it. They have talented players that could get them some wins, like they still have Kyle Kuzma. They still have Jonas Valanciunas. Maybe a bounce back comes from Jordan Poole. I'm a big Bilal Coulibaly fan. I'm excited to see what like Bub Carrington can do, and Alex Sarr I think could be really good defensively from day one. Corey Kispert's good. But again, like the Blazers, there's no incentive for them to win, and this is a team that I think is going to be very incompetent from day one. They were horrific last season. I think that carries over and they win pretty much the same amount of games. In the Western Conference at the 14 seed, I'm going to go ahead and place the Utah Jazz there. They kept Lauri Markkanen. They extended him. He is unable to be traded this season, so that is something that's no longer hanging over them, but I think they will still trade other people. I'd be surprised if Jordan Clarkson finishes the season on the team. I think there's a world where Walker Kessler's off the squad by the end of the year. Same thing with like a Colin Sexton. And overall, like the Blazers, they're just not nearly as talented as the teams above them, and they want to be towards the bottom of the standings. They would love to grab a top pick in this year's draft to get Lauri Markkanen a true co-star. Then over in the Eastern Conference, like I said, it was either going to be the Nets or the Wizards at the 15, so the Nets are then therefore the 14 seed. They're going to also win like 15-ish games. I think these two teams are going to be in a tank battle for the ages down to the wire, but ultimately, having Cam Johnson still, Dorian Finney-Smith, Nick Claxton, Cam Thomas, who is a bucket all things considered, I think will be enough to keep the Nets semi-afloat. They're going to lose a billion games, but they will get a few more wins, I think, than the Wizards will up until the trade deadline when Cam Johnson's probably gone and Dorian Finney-Smith and anybody of value. Now, the Nets, one reason they could go ahead and grab the 15 seed is because they have to tank as hard as they can this season. They need to get their pick because they got it back. They don't have a lot of their future picks. They got to make sure they capitalize now and get good lottery luck, or at least give themselves the best chance to win the lottery. So I think those two teams are pretty interchangeable, but I'm going to go ahead and put them at 14. Over in the Western Conference at 13, I have the San Antonio Spurs. It's unfortunate that they're not going to make a play-in run. It would be awesome to see Wemby get his first taste of postseason basketball and see Chris Paul elevate them to that level. But ultimately, I just think it's a little bit too early. They lack a lot of supporting talent. I don't know where much of the offensive punch is going to come from. I do think Chris Paul could be up there towards the league leaders in assists passing to Wemby, and Wemby is likely going to win Defensive Player of the Year. He's going to have a monster sophomore season, and I'm excited to see what like Devin Vassell can do this season and Keldon Johnson. I'm really excited about Stephon Castle over there. They do still have Trey Jones as an extra playmaker. It's not a bad team, but the Western Conference is just so deep, and while the Spurs are trying to push ahead, they want to be better, a lot better than they were last season. They're going to end up, in my opinion, towards the bottom of the standings, which is scary because if they land Cooper Flagg to go next to Wemby, it might just be over for the rest of the league. Then over in the Eastern Conference at the 13th spot, as much as I want to see them make a push back up the standings even further than this, I do have the Detroit Pistons. I just think it's still a little too early for them to make that play-in push. I hope Cade has a big breakthrough season. I hope Jay Nivey continues to show a lot of what he has shown so far in preseason, where he's looked amazing. The jumper has really been hitting. Jalen Duren is a really exciting young big, but he's got to be a lot better defensively. Asar Thompson's got to be a lot better offensively. I do think Tobias Harris and Tim Hardaway Jr. as additions are going to help a little bit, and having Simone Fontecchio as another floor spacer, alongside JB Bickerstaff just being a better coach than Monty Williams. That whole situation was a dumpster fire last season. The Pistons will be better. They will not win like 17 games, but they're just better teams in the Eastern Conference, if you ask me. Maybe they could push up to like a 12, but I think it's hard for me to envision them higher than that. Just don't have the talent level of the teams above them. At the 12th spot in the Western Conference, this is where it gets really contentious. I've got the Golden State Warriors. I don't think this team's going to be very good. Steph Curry's going to do amazing things. He always does. And in theory, some of their offseason additions could work out. I just don't think it's going to be enough. D'Anthony Melton has looked good at times, but he's been very injury prone in his recent career. Buddy Hield has some amazing moments in his last few stops, but it seems to ultimately always end in disappointment. Plus, there's no defense there from him. Draymond Green is still really good, but he's definitely getting up there in age. We could see some regression. What's going to happen amongst the young guys? Like, pods could pop, and so could Jonathan Kuminga, and so could Trace Jackson Davis, or like a Moses Moody. But I don't have a ton of confidence that any of them will elevate themselves to the level of a second option that the Warriors need. They didn't have one that was consistent last year, but at least Clay was some semblance of one. Now they really don't have anybody. It could just be by committee, but that's not something that I envision helping you get it done in the Western Conference. I think it's going to end up being a big-time Steph Curry job to get them as much wins as he can, but it won't be enough to compete in this deep conference. And ultimately, we're going to have to see some major changes happen with the Golden State Warriors if they want to be competitive anytime soon. Then in the Eastern Conference at the 12th spot, I have the Chicago Bulls. Part of me thought about moving the Bulls down below the Pistons, but I think having Zach LaVine, who is going to go out there and try to prove himself, whether that's to get a new contract down the line or to try and get himself traded out of Chicago by rebuilding his trade value, I think he will have a pretty solid start to the season until he probably ends up getting dealt. Vucevic isn't great, but at least he's somewhat decent in the interior, even though the three-point shot has completely dissipated. Giddey is probably going to have a better season this year, I would imagine, than what he had with the Thunder last year. Like, Kobe White's pretty good. I like Ayo Dosunmu. The Bulls have some very interesting young talent. I hope like Patrick Williams pops this season, or at least does something to showcase why he earned that contract recently. But it's not going to be enough to get them in the play-in. They will end up trading guys, if you ask me. And down the stretch of the season, I think they go into full tank mode, which they absolutely should. Then, at the 11th spot in the Western Conference, another contentious one, I've got the Los Angeles Clippers here. The Clippers, to me, just have really bad vibes, and it feels like an implosion is imminent. We already know that Kawhi Leonard isn't going to play in the preseason. We're not sure if he's going to be ready for opening night, and even if he is, how long before the inevitable injury? James Harden has had some really good moments the past few years, but those are pretty sparse, and down the stretch of last season, he really struggled. He was pretty good in the playoffs, I'll give him that, but we no longer have the consistent, dominant James Harden of old. They lost Paul George, and they added some decent role players, but I don't think like Derrick Jones Jr. and Chris Dunn and Mo Bamba or Kevin Porter Jr., I don't think any of those guys are going to get it done in games where you don't have Kawhi Leonard or don't have James Harden or don't have either of them. This feels like a team that's really going to just be treading water a lot of the season, hanging on the edge of the play-in and trying to keep themselves amongst relevance, amongst injuries, but it's not going to be enough in that they're going to fall into the lottery and potentially, as a Thunder fan, hopefully give them a lottery pick that maybe results in Cooper Flag. If you really want to see the league fall apart and break, that would be a scenario in which that would happen. Over in the Eastern Conference, I've got the Hornets here at the 11th seed. I really want to put the Hornets in the play-in. If you see me on Twitter, I have become a believer in this Hornets team. I feel like with LaMelo Ball, Brandon Miller, Mark Williams, if they can stay healthy, which Mark Williams is already out to start the season, so not the best sign for that, they can really put something together special. Trey Mann has been really good in the preseason, as of course a Thunder legend. I'm really rooting for him, and I feel like there could be some MIP buzz there with him. Buzz, pun intended, not intended, doesn't matter. Like Grant Williams is a solid role player, and Josh Green. I think they've done a good job of filling out this roster a little bit. It just depends on the stars being healthy, and I feel super confident that's going to be the case. But the Hornets are one of those teams that if they end up as like a 9 seed or even push close to the 8 seed, I don't think they'll quite get there, but get close to that, I wouldn't be surprised. I really like this team in the direction they're heading in. It's just going to be a couple more years, or at least a full healthy year like this season, I guess, could be. I'm not counting on it though. Then we get to the play-in teams. At 10 over in the Western Conference, my first play-in team, or I guess the last team in the play-in, is the Houston Rockets. I do think they're going to go ahead and make it this season. They're extremely deep. Don't have that star player I'd like to see for them to take the big jump like I've seen some people saying. A lot of people think this could be the leap team of the season. They move up to like a 5 or a 6 seed. I need to find out that they have like a guy before I put them in that spot. Maybe Şengün really bursts onto the scene as that player this year. Maybe Jalen Green continues over what he did at the end of last season and becomes the guy. Maybe Amen Thompson takes a massive leap people are expecting. A lot of people I've seen on Twitter recently. But I need to see it before I believe it. I think it will be enough, the depth, the great defense, and some of the potential with the young guys to get them into the plan, or at least in this conversation. I could see a world where they're still an 11 or a 12 seed, but like a few games out. I'm going to go ahead and say this is the Rockets' year. Now, will they make the playoffs? In my opinion, no, but they will get a little bit of postseason action back in Houston, and ultimately, that's a decent spot to be going into what could be a pivotal offseason. In the Eastern Conference, at the 10th spot, I do have the Toronto Raptors, another team like the Charlotte Hornets that I've become more and more in on as this offseason has gone on. RJ Barrett and Emmanuel quickly had an amazing end to the season with Toronto. Scotty Barnes has all the potential in the world. I love what Darko Rajakovic has done over there with that offense. I love the way they move, the fluidity of it. It feels like something that could really catch opposing teams off guard and elevate the talent, even if it's not up to the level of some of the other teams in the Eastern Conference vying for this spot. It could be enough to get them here into the play-in tournament. I think it will be enough. They're not going to make the playoffs. They're going to fall a little bit short, but I like the young core that they're building over there. I do still feel like they need to find another guy alongside Scotty Barnes if they want to make this thing happen. For the moment, though, they're going to continue to progress, and I think it will be enough to land them in the play-in tournament. Back over to the West, my 9 seed is the New Orleans Pelicans. This might seem very low, and I think it could be. If they were a 5 seed at the end of the season, I wouldn't be surprised, but I just don't know how the talent quite fits. It's a lot of talent, don't get me wrong, between CJ and DeJounte and Ingram and Zion and Trey Murphy and Herb Jones, but I don't like the way it all congeals together. It sounds like they're going to start the lineup of CJ McCollum, DeJounte Murray, Brandon Ingram, Zion, and Herb Jones effectively running the 5 out there defensively. I don't really like it. I feel like there's not enough shooting in that lineup. I don't love the idea of Herb Jones guarding bigs after he was so good in the role they had him in last season. He was a big reason why the defense was as stout as it was. You're now switching up his role entirely, all because they don't have a center, which is something they should have addressed in the offseason. They can still address throughout the year, but it's going to be a little clunky, and now it's going to be tougher to fit them in mid-season. I don't know. I feel like the Pelicans have built this weird amalgamation of really interesting talent, but talent that doesn't necessarily fit together. I think a Brandon Ingram trade either comes this season or in the offseason, and that's when this thing really starts to click. But for the moment, the lack of a big man and just the confusing construction of the roster, as well as constant injury concerns with the Pelicans between Ingram and Zion, is enough to make me a little bit hesitant to put them beyond this spot. And in the Eastern Conference, I have the Atlanta Hawks at the 9 spot. They're rounding out this bottom group of teams. I feel like everybody expects the top 8 from last year to again be the top 8 in the East in a different order, but at least those same squads. I agree. I think the Hawks will round out the play-in teams. When you have Trae Young, it's going to be enough to give you a pretty solid offense at the very least. I like some of the defensive pieces they have there now with Jalen Johnson, who I do expect to take a big jump. You've got Dyson Daniels. Zachary Visachet has looked really good in some of his preseason games. Have DeAndre Hunter. You still have Clint Capella and Yeka Okongwu. Bogdan Bogdanovic for an offensive punch off the bench. This team's not going to be very good, but I don't think they're going to be horrifically bad or anything like that. Maybe if at some point during the season they end up trading Trae Young, which I don't anticipate. I think that's a move that is more likely to happen this summer. But if it does happen throughout the season, they could certainly tank in these standings. But presuming it doesn't occur, I'm going to put them here at the 9 spot to round out the teams outside of the top 8. Which brings us to the top 8 in each conference. And at that 8 spot in the West, this is where I have the Los Angeles Lakers. I'm actually decently high on them because of the JJ Redick addition. I've loved the way they've played in the preseason. A lot more movement, a lot more actions, fluidity to the offense, more so than just, hey, LeBron, AD, go cook with a pick and roll. And that does have me excited, but I just don't know if I see them above a lot of the other really good teams in the Western Conference. The depth and overall talent beyond LeBron and AD is pretty inconsistent, and those two guys last season both played 70-plus games. At this point in their careers, they're pretty injury-prone. Now, maybe that's a sort of a trend where they're able to stay on the court, but to me, that more so feels like an outlier. I don't think they're both going to have major injuries or anything, but I think more missed games are down the pipeline. They don't have the talent to replicate what those two guys can do when they're out there. They can beat almost anybody on any given night, but I just don't think it's going to be consistent enough to get them beyond this 8 seed. They could go a bit higher if they really stay healthy. I'm just not really banking on it. And in the East, this is where I have the Miami Heat. They are a team that never really takes the regular season that seriously. Maybe they do differently this year. I mean, Jimmy Butler is reportedly locked in and he's in a contract year, so it would be in his best interest to ball out and really be locked in from day one. Bam Adebayo is shooting threes now. Love to see that. And they do have interesting talent like Tyler Hero and Terry Rozier and Jaime Jaquez, and I like Kel'el Ware a lot. They just didn't really do anything to get better while the rest of the conference tried to improve. Everybody improved in some way, if you ask me. So I think they're going to stagnate here, once again be an 8 seed. They'll be in the playoffs, and they'll be a team that's kind of a more difficult out than you would hope for, but it's not going to be enough to make really any noise, if you ask me. Let's go ahead and round out the play-in tournament, starting at the 17 in the Western Conference. I have the Sacramento Kings. I don't think this is going to be a bad team. I just don't like their ceiling as much as some of the teams ahead of them. DeMar DeRozan, very interesting acquisition that could really diversify their offense, give them another bucket getter, and they've got so many great clutch players now between De'Aaron Fox and DeRozan and Malik Monk, but the depth is pretty shaky. Outside of Monk off the bench, it's nobody that I trust that much. Like Kevin Huerter had a pretty down season last year. He's been dealing with some injuries, so I'm not quite sure what we're going to get from him. I'm excited to see what Devin Carter looks like when he comes back, but he's a rookie coming off injury, so I can't count on that much of an impact. I still worry a bit about the defense. The offensive fit, I do think, could still be a little bit clunky. They've struggled to shoot the 3 ball here in preseason. I don't think that'll be a major issue once we get into the year, but it is something to note. The Kings, I feel like, just still have some question marks that I don't maybe have as much of with the teams ahead of them, so I'll leave the Kings here at 7. I feel like this is one that I could regret, though, if things really click. They can maybe replicate 2023, where they're one of the better teams in the Western Conference. Then you get to the 17 in the East, and this is maybe my least favorite pick. I've got the Orlando Magic here at 7. I hate this. I wanted to put the Magic way higher. I just couldn't really figure it out in my head. The defense is amazing. It's going to continue to be amazing. I like the KCP addition, I know. But ultimately, I feel like the teams ahead of them just have more talent. And with the Magic, they made a big jump last season. They almost won a playoff series. I could see them stagnating just a little bit. I'm not saying they're going to regress or that they're falling apart or that Paolo or anybody are frauds. I just feel like as a young team, they maybe over-exceeded some expectations last year. They might come back down to earth a little bit. Even if they are a better team than they were last season, it may not be enough to replicate their seeding that they had last year in the Eastern Conference. That's all I'm going to say. I could see a world where they're one of the better teams in the East, like a top 3 seed, because Paolo could take that superstar jump. Franz Wagner could take a jump. Jalen Suggs is an elite defender, and they've got elite defenders all over this roster with Jonathan Isaac. And again, the KCP thing, I think, will help overall with their shooting, with just giving them another versatile defender they could throw out there. Offensively, he'll be a boost. But I think I like the teams above them just a little bit better. And that brings us to our top 6 in the Western Conference. I've got the Memphis Grizzlies. This is a team that I've seen a lot higher in some people's standings. I've seen a lot lower. I myself have gone back and forth on where I'm going to place them. Ultimately, I'm going to leave them here at 6. I love the idea of this team on paper between John Morant, who could be an MVP candidate, and I think people have forgotten how good he is. Desmond Bane, an elite second option. Jaren Jackson, Marcus Smart, 2 depoys, a 7-footer in Zach Edey to grab rebounds to set screens. I like the construction of this team, but it's been a long time. I mean, a full calendar year is forever in the NBA since we've seen them play in this Western Conference, so I don't know how they're going to quite fit back into the picture. Maybe the West has just passed them up and they're not actually as good as we remember them. And also, the injury bug will not stay away from this team, whether it's John Morant tweaking his ankle in the preseason, it's Jaren Jackson already dealing with something, it's Gigi Jackson going to miss a couple of months, it's Vince Williams dealing with injury. I worry about Zach Edey being a 7-footer with that frame. How is he going to hold up? He dealt with a little bit of stuff going on in Summer League. There were just some concerns with the injury bug. I don't trust the Grizzlies to have a fully healthy team for the full season. Even if I like the team on paper, I think they'll do enough and keep their guys on the court enough to get themselves a top 6 seed, but I just didn't feel comfortable pushing them higher than that. In the East, I've got the Pacers here at the 6th seed, the only team that for some reason isn't a PNG file with their logo, whatever. The Pacers grabbed the 6th spot, and I know they're the 6th spot last year, and everything says they should be better this season with a full year of Siakam, and fingers crossed Halliburton stays healthier this season and young players developing. It feels like they should be higher than this, but I just don't think they're going to rack up as many regular season wins as the teams ahead of them. I feel like this is one of those squads that as a 6th seed could pull off an upset in that first round against one of the top 3 squads, but it's not going to be enough to get them beyond the spot, in my opinion. The defense is still pretty shaky, even if the offense is insane, and Halliburton and Siakam developing that chemistry as a duo. The young player progression we're probably going to see from Nembhard, Obi Toppin, guys like that is very exciting. I just couldn't get them higher than this. I really hate this 6-7 here in the Eastern Conference between the Pacers and Magic. Both teams feel like they should be higher. I just couldn't fit them in. Beginning the top 5, I've got the Phoenix Suns in the Western Conference. This is a team that I both like their offseason, but still have major question marks about, like Tyus Jones and Monte Morris as playmakers. Love that addition, but neither one of them is a defender. The starting lineup I don't like. I've been vocal about that here on the channel. I think it's going to really lack defensively. I feel like it's only a matter of time before Bradley Beal gets moved to the bench, or at least there's conversations about that. But I do still feel like they've got amazing top-end talent with Beal, Booker, and Kevin Durant if they can stay on the court. Big question mark there. I will be honest on that, but I feel like they can keep their guys at least semi out there, and having 3 of them makes it easier to survive when one of them is hurt. Mike Budenholzer as the head coach, I'm excited about. Love what I've seen from them in the preseason, the way that they've been operating, the offensive flow. I'm excited about Ryan Dunn as a UVA guy, a guy who went to UVA. He was one of my favorite prospects purely because he was amazing defensively, but the offense was abysmal. He's knocking down threes now. Like, he knocked down some transition pull-up threes, some step-back threes, like off the dribble. It's crazy stuff. It feels like they just fixed his shot, and if that's the case, he's a real game changer for this team from day one. So I'm going to buy into the Suns a little bit. I don't think they're a home court advantage team, but I do think the Suns will be better than last season and grab a top 5 seed. Over in the Eastern Conference, this is where I have the Cleveland Cavaliers, one of the most injured teams in the league last season. They were decimated, had so many guys out, whether it was Garland or Mobley or Mitchell missing time or Jared Allen. I feel like they could never keep the team completely out there, and maybe that'll pop up again, but I feel like it's got to be at least a little bit better for the Cavaliers. And even with all those issues, they were still right there as almost a 50-win team last season. Garland, not to mention, just had a horrific year by his standards. I believe he will bounce back at least a little bit. The Donovan Mitchell thing isn't hanging over their head anymore. They're solidified, so they probably feel more comfortable to make improving moves throughout the season if they need to. I think the Cavs have a better year, right around a 50-win team again, and you grab a 5 seed in the East. Now we reach the top 4 seeds in each conference. In the West, at the 4th spot, I've got the Minnesota Timberwolves. It's a 1 seed step back from where they were last season, but I don't think it's anything drastic. I just feel like it's going to take a little bit of time for the Julius Randle thing to gel. I mean, Ant played his entire career with Karl Anthony Towns. Gobert and he kind of developed a lot of chemistry. Randle's coming off an injury that ended his season like halfway through last year. He was really bad to begin last season. I feel like there's again going to be some rust. So I'm just anticipating growing pains for the Wolves at the beginning of the season, even if by the end of the year, they're maybe a little bit better than they were last season or right around the same. I think at the beginning, they're going to rack up a few more losses, and in a Western Conference where there's going to be a ton of wins to go amongst the top teams, I think this will bring them 1 spot back. And then the Eastern Conference, I have the Philadelphia 76ers. I'm very bought in on this Sixers team. I think this is the best team of the Embiid era, but it does sound like they're going to do a lot of precautionary things to make sure they're healthy going into the playoffs, and in my opinion, that will come at the expense of some regular season wins. Embiid will not play any back-to-backs, it sounds like, and that's 15 games, so you can already go ahead and mark him for at most 67. He's going to sit out some games here and there, I'm sure. Paul George hyperextended his knee tonight in a preseason game. Doesn't sound like it's going to be anything too drastic, but I wouldn't be surprised if they manage his minutes a little bit at the beginning of the season and throughout. Now, Maxi's still going to be crazy. When they're all on the court, this is going to be a juggernaut of a team. I just don't know how many nights we see the full squad out there. So I'm going to put them here at 4, even though I do think this is one of the better Sixers squads we've seen, and people are kind of sleeping on them with their chance to really break through in the East. At the 3rd seed in the Western Conference, this is where I have the Dallas Mavericks. They were really hot to end last season when they got everybody in town. I'm anticipating a Derek Lively jump. Luka's still going to be insane, right up there in the MVP conversations. Kyrie Irving's going to be ridiculous too. I'm excited to see what like Najee Marshall can bring to the table, and maybe Quentin Grimes can contribute. But I do think this is a team that won't quite crack the top 2, just because I feel like they're more so built for knocking teams over in the playoffs than racking up a billion regular season wins. Jason Kidd and the Mavericks really locked in specifically when they got to the playoffs this year. That's where they leveled up. I think that's the kind of team they are, where they're never going to grab like a top 1 or 2 seed, but they will be a super threatening force. Klay Thompson is the X factor for them. What does he look like throughout the season? Is he more the Klay of old? Is he defending at all? Is he the Klay of this past season where he's hyper inconsistent? Time will only tell. Tonight he went, I think 0 for 9 in his preseason game. I don't think that's going to be indicative of how he plays the majority of the season, but yeah, a little bit of a wild card. I think there's just some stuff to figure out for the Mavericks a little bit more than the 2 teams ahead of them, so I'm going to put them here, even though they definitely are one of the biggest threats to win the Western Conference. And then at the 3 seed, I have the Milwaukee Bucks here in the East. They're going to have a good year. Dame's going to bounce back. Giannis is going to be insane. I anticipate him being in some MVP discussions. I like the addition of a Gary Trent Jr. I like DeLon Wright for this team too. They're going to need Brook Lopez and Chris Middleton to stay on the court and play well. Chris Middleton apparently got 2 ankle surgeries going into this season, so I've gone back and forth between them and the Sixers at 3 and 4. I could honestly flip this, but I'm going to keep the Bucks here at 3. I think Giannis is enough to get them to this spot. The Bucks are like always a top 3 seed, so I'll say they continue that trend. Going back to the Western Conference at the 2 seed, I have the Denver Nuggets. They did get worse, if you ask me, this offseason, but ultimately, when you have Nikola Jokic, Jamal Murray, Michael Porter Jr., Aaron Gordon, you can pretty much pencil this team in for at least 50 wins, probably closer to the mid-50s. The KCP loss and the reliance on the young guys, I feel like really burns them when you get to the playoffs, but then they will be still capable of racking up a billion regular season wins, even if they're once again more so of a second round exit than the favorites in the Western Conference. So yeah, in the Eastern Conference, it's going to be the New York Knicks at the 2 seed. This is a really good Knicks squad. I honestly considered putting them at the 1 spot, but I just couldn't get over the Boston Celtics up there at the top of the conference. With the Karl Anthony Towns addition, they now have a stacked starting 5 with so many talented players, both offensively and defensively. Depth is a little bit shakier, but I think it's enough. When Mitchell Robinson comes back, they're only going to get deeper. Jalen Brunson has proven that he is an all-NBA caliber player that can lead them to a lot of wins. They're versatile. This is just a team that, in my opinion, is really built to rack up a lot of W's in the regular season as well as be a threat in the playoffs. If they got close to 60 wins, wouldn't be surprised. And that leaves us with the 1 seeds. It's the Oklahoma City Thunder in the West and the Boston Celtics in the Eastern Conference. These were the 1 seeds last year. I think everybody's picking them again. With the Thunder, they're of course my favorite team, so some people might say this is biased, but again, everybody's picking them. They were the 1 seed last year. They are a young team that's going to gun for that. It's not like they're one of these teams that doesn't really care about the regular season that much. They care. They want to go after it, and they made 2 massive additions in Caruso and Isaiah Hartenstein. Caruso gives them another versatile defender who shot 40% from 3 last season. Hartenstein helps out with the rebounding issue. You've still got Shai, who is an MVP caliber player. You've got 2 really good young rising players in Jalen Williams and Chet Holmgren, who in my opinion could both make all-star conversations this year. They're a top 5 offensive and defensive team last season. I think they'll once again replicate that and be more top 3 in both categories. There's a world where they finish top 2 in both offense and defense. That's a 1 seed if you ask me. And for the Celtics, basically the same thing. They won 64 games last year. They're going to be without Porzingis for a little bit to begin the season, but even without KP in the lineup, they were still ridiculous last year. They've still got Tatum, they've got Brown, they've got Derek White, they've got Drew Holiday. They were also top 5 on both sides of the ball. They ran away with the East. I don't think the additions that anybody made, as well as the KP injury, is going to be enough to take them out of this spot. I do think the gap will be a lot slimmer. Like the Knicks might be 3 or 4 games behind them, as opposed to, what was it, like 14 last season between the Celtics and the team behind them. They're going to be the 1 seed. It just won't be as much of a runaway, but they will get that top spot. And that rounds out our standings. I'll go ahead and do a quick scroll through so you can see over here in the Western Conference. I've got the Blazers, the Jazz, the Spurs, the Warriors, the Clippers, the Rockets, the Pelicans, the Lakers, the Kings, the Grizzlies, the Suns, the Wolves, the Mavericks, the Nuggets, and the Thunder. And in the Eastern Conference from bottom to top, I have the Wizards, the Nets, the Pistons, the Bulls, the Hornets, the Raptors, the Hawks, the Heat, the Magic, the Pacers, the Cavs, the Sixers, the Bucks, the Knicks, and the Celtics. Those are my standings. Let me know what you think down below in the comments. Let's move on now to some player stats. For this segment, I want to go ahead and shout out Underdog Fantasy, who's going to be doing some sponsor stuff with me here on the channel this season, which is really exciting. I use Underdog quite a bit, so it's cool that they went ahead and reached out. If you want to sign up for Underdog, you can use code CONE, which will give you a first-time deposit match of 50% up to $1,000. So say you put in $10, you get $5 back, and so on and so forth. And I thought a fun way to kick off the partnership would be to do a season-long entry. So the way it works with Underdog is typically I do pick 'em, where you pick higher or lower on a player's projected stat, and if you get all of them to hit, you win. You could also do a flex option where you can just get some of them and you still win, but you don't maybe win as much. You can also do daily drafts. There's a lot of options, but like I said, I typically do pick 'em, and right now, up until this season begins, they have season-long options. So I hopped in a stream with y'all yesterday, and we built out what I think is a pretty good season-long pick 'em. So there's 5 players involved, and let me go ahead and list it out in my reasoning behind these picks. First of all, Luka Doncic, higher than 9.4 assists per game. Last year, he averaged right around 9.8. So he averaged more last season, and in my opinion, Luka continues to get better and better. And with Klay Thompson now in the fold and Luka having been injured throughout the playoffs last year, I feel like he's going to defer a little bit more. He's going to try to get Klay involved, get Kyrie involved, guys like Najee Marshall and PJ Washington, who will be throwing a million lobs to Daniel Gafford and Derek Lively. I think Luka could average north of 10 assists per game this season, or at least get back up there into the high 9s. He's still going to score a lot, lot, but Luka, in my opinion, is going to take a bit of a playmaking step this season, take the scoring down a little bit, which will lead to higher assists, so I feel pretty good about 9.4 assists per game at least. Then we have Shai at 30.4 points per game, and this one I love. Shai was averaging a pretty consistent 31.1 last season before he had a full month where he dealt with a hamstring injury, which really brought down his scoring. It put him right around 30.1 for the year. And I know there are a lot of people that think he's going to lose a lot of points per game because jumps from J-Dub and Chet and the additions that they made, but I don't think that's the case. Giddey had a lot of usage. Shai's going to take on some of that. J-Dub is going to take on some of that. Chet's going to take on some of it. Shai's been shooting more threes in the preseason, so it seems like that's somewhere he's trying to go. And if he's shooting more threes, he's keeping himself highly efficient and having more talent around him, as well as a big body screener and Hart trying to open the game up. I don't see any way Shai doesn't average at least 30, and I feel like 30.5 is so easily attainable for a guy in Shai who scored 30 plus in like 50 games last season. Give me higher on that. LeBron, 2.2 threes per game. This is right around the amount of threes he made per game last season. I believe he was at 2.1. And JJ Redick continues to harp on, we need to shoot more threes. We need to shoot more threes. So I think LeBron's going to shoot more threes, and last year he shot really well from three, right around 40%. He was a sniper. I think LeBron getting up there in age is going to continue to buy into that, buy into the JJ Redick philosophy, and hit more than 2.2 threes per game. Then we've got Jaylen Brown, higher than 23.7 points per game. I feel very good about this one too. He averaged 23 points per game last season, so you need almost a full point jump, which you might say is a little bit scary, but they're going to be without Porzingis for at least the first couple months of the season, if not more, and I'm sure even when he comes back, they're going to load manage, they're going to keep him in and out of the lineup. I feel like they're going to rely a lot more on JB this season to be a scoring punch with KP missing a bunch of time. I wouldn't be surprised if other players are stepping in and out of the lineup. I think JB is going to average at least 24 points per game. He's coming off a Finals MVP run. I think it'll be a big year for Jalen. And finally, I've got Ja Morant higher than 26.6 points per game. It's revenge season for Ja. He put 27.4 up in 2022, 26.2 in 2023. In his 9 games, he only averaged 25.1 last season, but that was with him dealing with injury and still working his way back. Now he's had a very long time to go ahead and rehab, get healthy. He's going to be playing alongside some very talented players that are going to open the game up for him. Zach Edey is going to be able to set big body screens to get Ja Morant downhill. And again, I think he's out for revenge. I think he's here to prove to the world that he is still one of the best players in the world, that the Grizzlies are still a force to be reckoned with. So give me revenge mode Ja. Give me Jaylen Brown, the Finals MVP. Give me the King, averaging more than 2.2 threes per game. Give me Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, who may be the MVP, as well as Luka, probably the top 2 MVP finishers. One to average over 30.4 points per game, one to average over 9.4 assists. I feel good about this. This is my entry. Let me know down below if you end up deciding to follow along with it. I'm going to be updating you on it all throughout the season, so you will be getting those. But yeah, one more time, you can use code CONE when you sign up for Underdog. I'll leave a link down below in the description to get a first deposit match up to $1,000, 50% of whatever you put in. Yeah, shout out to Underdog for sponsoring this season. And now, let's get into some awards. Let's start off with Rookie of the Year, and for that, I'm going to go with Zach Edey. He's a pretty popular pick. He's the favorite, I would imagine, amongst most people, and it makes sense. He's going to get a ton of opportunity as the starting center for a team that I imagine will be pretty solid in the West. Like I said, predicted them to be the 6th seed. He's going to have some pretty solid scoring games. He's got a good touch. If players are in and out of the lineup, I could see him putting up some 20 pieces, some 15-point games. Rebounds, we're going to grab a lot of them. He's huge. He's going to block some shots just by nature of that too. He's going to be a good screener. He's going to do a lot for the Grizzlies and get maybe more opportunity than any rookie from day one on a good team. So yeah, Edey just feels like a very natural pick. I could also see like a Reed Shepard, a Zachary Sachet. I could see Alex Sarr still. Really any number of rookies, I feel like, with it being such a up and down class, like there's no real guy from day one. I could see a lot of players making noise in this. Like Bub Carrington, I think, is really interesting with the Wizards too. But yeah, just go ahead and give me Zach Edey, the guy that's going to have the most opportunity on a pretty good team. For Defensive Player of the Year, I think I'm just going to be boring and go Victor Wembanyama, mainly because it feels like they've already engraved his name on the award. He is such a prohibitive favorite to win this. I could see Gobert repeating, although I feel like every year people think that Gobert got exposed in the playoffs, even though he didn't this year, but I feel like people still think so. So he'll probably get some negative buzz because of that. Bam Adebayo, I would love to see him win it, but I just don't know if the Heat are going to be good enough. You could see maybe Chet Holmgren make some noise if the Thunder are great defensively, like a Jalen Suggs if the Magic are really putting things together. If suddenly the Pelicans are clicking and Herb Jones is playing that center spot and locking people up, maybe he gets some love. Anthony Davis if the Lakers put it together. A lot of players I could see winning Depoy, but I do feel like ultimately it's just destined to be Victor Wembanyama this season. Again, I feel like the award should already have his name engraved on it because that's the way that discussion has kind of gone. For Most Improved Player, I'm going to go with Jalen Johnson, which I feel like has become a popular pick as of late. I was pretty early on this train in my way too early NBA award prediction video a few months back. I believe Jalen Johnson was my pick, or at least he was up there in my honorable mentions. I just love the idea of him really stepping into that second option role over there in Atlanta. Now that DeJounte Murray is gone, next to Trae Young is an elite playmaker who can set him up. He's developed a lot in terms of his own self-creation. Defensively, he's really elevated too. I could see him averaging like a 20-10, 21-10, right around there, being in some all-star talks potentially, or at least discussed as an outside chance guy. I don't think the Hawks will be good enough to get 2 All-Stars, but he's someone who's going to start to pop up on that radar if the efficiency stays the way it was or even gets better. Jalen Johnson, I think, could still win the award, even though last season he was also a candidate and would have been firmly in the conversation if he didn't miss a lot of games. Other players that are interesting are like a Jalen Williams, of course, from my favorite team, the Thunder. Jonathan Kuminga for the Warriors, I think, could take a jump. Maybe if like Jalen Green really puts it together this season, it could be a guy like him. Emmanuel Quickley and RJ Barrett over there in Toronto are interesting as well. A million players from Most Improved. Most of the time, it's somebody who kind of jumps out of nowhere, but I feel like we've got some good names. Josh Giddey maybe over there in Chicago with some more opportunity. Evan Mobley maybe finally takes that offensive leap. A lot of names, again, you could throw out there, so let me know who is somebody that I didn't mention in this video that you think could also be in that MIP talk. Then we get to 6th man of the year. I'm going to go with Malik Monk. Again, I don't love the depth over there in Sacramento, but Malik is going to be insane like he typically is. He's going to score quite a bit. He's going to play make. He's going to be insanely clutch. It's stuff that Malik Monk always does. I had him as my pick last year to win 6th man of the year, and I feel like this year he's going to get that recognition. Naz Reid and Dante DiVincenzo are both interesting in Minnesota, but I feel like they'll take a little bit away from each other. Bogdan Bogdanovic is also interesting in Atlanta. Had a very underappreciated season last year, but I don't think the Hawks are going to be good enough for him to really get that love again. And I feel like with the Thunder, like a Hartenstein or a Caruso could theoretically, depending on who's coming off the bench, but neither one of them really puts up the numbers to be in that conversation either. So yeah, I'm going to go with Malik Monk. I think he gets the award that he maybe should have deserved last year. Not that Naz Reid didn't. I think it could have gone either way, but Malik Monk was my pick. Then we've got Clutch Player of the Year. For this one, I'm going to go with Luka Doncic. He has had some massive moments. He makes highlights out of thin air. It feels like anytime you put Luka in a game-winning scenario, he's going to hit the most insane bucket you've ever seen and probably win the Mavericks the game. So I'm going to go with him. They're going to be a really good team. He's going to get some recognition. He's going to be insane. This is one that's kind of hard to pick because I feel like clutch numbers fluctuate quite a bit. You have to think about who's going to be in clutch games, who's going to be with the ball in their hands a lot in those clutch moments. I think Luka kind of fits both of those as just an overall clutch player too. So yeah, give me Luka Doncic for clutch player of the year. Again, you could talk about Steph Curry, who won it last year. You could talk about any number of Kings players between Fox or DeRozan or even Malik Monk. Shai is interesting too. Over in the Eastern Conference, like Jimmy Butler has had some big time moments left and right. I don't know. This is one of those awards I feel like we haven't quite figured out how the voting works and how they pick, like what's the precedent? Could guys win? Is there even voter fatigue for a clutch player of the year? We don't really know yet, so I don't know. We'll have to wait and see. But yeah, Luka's my pick. For coach of the year, I've gone really back and forth, but I think I'm going to go with Joe Mazzulla. After winning the finals, I feel like he's gotten some recognition. People realize that he is a good coach. The media respects him. And with the Celtics having the Porzingis injury ahead, but in my opinion, still grabbing the 1 seed, I think there will be a narrative for him to go ahead and win this award. It's definitely not a guarantee. This is one of the most wide open coach of the year races, I feel like, in a minute. I can see Tom Thibodeau with the Knicks if they win around 60 games. I can see Michael Malone if the Nuggets are as good as I think they are, despite a lot of people anticipating a step back. If the Wolves are again really good, I could see Chris Finch winning it. I don't know if Mark Daigneault's going to repeat because it's hard to do that in the NBA. Maybe Eric Spoelstra finally wins one, but I just don't think the Heat are going to have the wins for it. If like the Magic or the Pacers really get up there in the standings, I could see Rick Carlisle or Jamal Mosley winning it. I don't know. It feels extremely wide open. I'm just going to go ahead and land on Joe Mazzulla, thinking that he will get some respect after winning the finals last year and leading a team with a pretty injured core piece to another 1 seed. For executive of the year, I'm going to go with Sam Presti. I think the Caruso and Hartenstein additions are huge. A lot of people recognize that. And the Thunder, like I said, will repeat as the 1 seed in the Western Conference. I could also see like Daryl Morey winning it. I could see Nico Harrison for the Mavericks if Clay starts going crazy and like they fight for the 1 seed. I could see Leon Rose for the Knicks winning it. A lot of different executives, but I decided to land on Sam Presti. And that leads us to the MVP award. And you know me, you probably know where I'm going at this point if you watch the channel at all. It's Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. I'm going with Shai. He finished second in voting last year. He averaged over 30 points per game. He is a threat to do that every single night. He's one of the most efficient players in the league. He plays on both sides of the ball. And he's going to be the best player on, in my opinion, the team with the most wins in the Western Conference and potentially the most wins in the entire NBA this season. I really feel like the Thunder are going to be amazing. And Shai is going to be the head of the snake. He's going to average right around 31, 32-ish points per game. There are going to be some good second options, but nobody's going to get close to him in terms terms of production. He's the go-to guy. He's insanely clutch. I really think this is the year between the winning and the stats he's going to put up. It feels like the perfect storm for Shai to win MVP coming off last year, where after he had a really good playoff run, you saw a lot of media people saying like, oh, I voted for Shai, more people should have, or some people saying like, oh, I felt like Shai was the real MVP out there. I think that hype starts to build a little bit throughout the season as the Thunder start to really go on a run, and Shai Gilgeous-Alexander will ultimately be raising the MVP trophy at the end of the season. In my opinion, it's between him and Luka Doncic. If the Mavericks start fighting with the Thunder and he's got these insane stats, I think Luka could definitely get it. He's overdue, to be honest, for an MVP. He's had some of the craziest numbers without winning one that I've ever seen. Giannis, I feel like could be in that convo too if the Bucks are up there in a 2 and 3 seed conversation. I could maybe see Jokic making some noise, but I just don't know if they're going to give him another one. Like, I feel like a fourth MVP is probably out of reach for right now. Voter fatigue has to come in at some point. Embiid's not going to play enough games, so I don't believe he's really going to be in the conversation. And yeah, those are my main guys. Maybe like an Anthony Edwards if the Wolves are really going crazy, but for the most part, I think it's probably between Shai and Luka, and you know me, I'm going to pick Shai. And finally, we've got NBA playoffs. I'm not going to go through the full bracket. We're just going to talk who's in the East and Western Conference Finals, and ultimately, who wins the whole thing. So, in the Eastern Conference Finals, I've got the Celtics and the Knicks. The Celtics, I mean, it's no surprise. They're the Celtics. They're the reigning champions. They were dominant all last season. They're going to be back here even with injuries. I would be shocked if they weren't. And then we have the New York Knicks, who I like this team a lot. Brunson is a near superstar caliber player. He was almost All-NBA first team last year. You add Mikal Bridges to this team, who gives you another versatile wing. Next to OG Anunoby, you still have Deuce McBride. You've got Josh Hart. Of course, Karl Anthony Towns comes into the fold, who I'm really excited about. I think he's really going to elevate this team offensively, make them a lot more dynamic on that end, which I felt like they needed a lot of times throughout the playoff run last year. Tom Thibodeau is going to really get these guys to play heavy minutes, so they're going to win those games. They're going to shorten the rotation. If Mitchell Robinson comes back healthy, that's a big plus too. They have the ability to make moves at the deadline if they need, and ultimately, I do think they'll do enough to get back to the Eastern Conference Finals for the first time in quite a while. But are they going to beat the Celtics? No, I think the Celtics go back to the NBA Finals. I think they beat the Knicks in, let's say, 6 games. It'll be a competitive series. Mikal and OG are a lot to handle for Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum. 2 great defensive wings going up against the stars of the Celtics. But I just think there's too much firepower. The defense of Drew Holiday and Derek White is enough to try and smother Jalen Brunson a little bit, slow him down. And if you can slow him down, I do think there's a way you can bring the Knicks completely crumbling down as an offense. KP also can help out with Karl Anthony Towns, stretch the floor, really keep, even if it's Mitchell Robinson down there, away from the paint to allow guys to get inside. The Celtics are just a juggernaut. They're built extremely, extremely well. They're well coached. I think they get back to the NBA Finals, defeating the Knicks in 6 games, with Jason Tatum winning Eastern Conference Finals MVP. And over in the Western Conference Finals, I've got the Oklahoma City Thunder and the Dallas Mavericks, a rematch of the second round series they played this past playoffs. One that was really close. It went to 6 games. There was a point differential of literally 0 between the two teams when it was all said and done. But the Mavs getting the upper hand. They went on to the Western Conference Finals, won that, went to the NBA Finals before ultimately losing, and then they added Klay Thompson, they added Najee Marshall, and I'm sure they're going to get development from young guys like a Derek Lively, for example, and you could definitely see a bit more cohesion from this team now that they've had a full offseason together and they're going into a full year together as their current setup for the first time. Then for the Thunder, as I mentioned, I think they're going to be the 1 seed. I think they'll have the MVP in Shai, all the young talent in the world, a very versatile offensive and defensive team that address some of their biggest issues with the additions of Caruso and Isaiah Hartenstein out there. This would be a bloodbath of a battle if you ask me. And ultimately, the question is, who wins this time? I think nobody's going to be surprised. I'm going to take the Oklahoma City Thunder to win the Western Conference Finals this year with Shai Gilgeous-Alexander as the Western Conference Finals MVP. I just think the Thunder are a bit more well-rounded. With Shai at the helm, they've also got a top 5 player like the Mavericks have in Luka, but the Thunder are a bit more stout defensively. I trust some of the shooters more. They were the best shooting team in the league last season. It sounds like they're going to add some volume. Hartenstein is going to be big in slowing down the constant lobs that the Mavericks threw last season with Derek Lively out there and Daniel Gafford. He's going to grab some offensive rebounds. Caruso gives them another tool to throw at a Kyrie Irving and a Luka Doncic. I think this is the Thunder's year. Maybe I'm biased, maybe I'm delusional. You can let me know down below in the comments. But I'm definitely not alone in picking the Thunder to win the West. They're the favorites right now. I kind of picked the 2 favorites in the Thunder and the Celtics, but they're favorites for a reason. And I do think it's going to be an Oklahoma City Thunder Boston Celtics finals in 2025. And with the Thunder set to be championship contenders, I'm going to be at as many games as possible whenever I go. I'm going to use SeatClub to go ahead and buy my tickets. Another season-long sponsor of the channel here who I'm very excited about because they're really new and I've never seen tickets this cheap. As someone who goes to a lot of events, basketball games, I go to comedy shows, I go to concerts, they've got all of that, and they're tickets with literally no fees. The way that it works is you pay a single year-long fee, which is typically $99, but if you use code CONE, and I'll leave a link below in the description so you can go ahead and check it out, it's only $79, and for the full year, you get access to, again, all these tickets with no fees. So like when the Thunder play the Knicks here in New York City, where I live at Madison Square Garden, could be a finals preview, $187 for these Section 226 Row 23 tickets. If I look on Ticketmaster, the exact same tickets, $255. That's about $70 more. So I pretty much already make up the difference by buying through SeatClub for this one game with the fee that I'm going to pay for the year. And then I'm going to go to a number of other games. I'm going to go to, again, those concerts and those comedy shows and a number of events. But really all I have to do is go to like 2 or 3 things and it's already paid for itself, and then some for all the extra events that I go to. So it's definitely worth it for me. I think it's going to be really worth it for a lot of y'all. So again, if you want to use SeatClub, you can sign up using code CONE and it'll only be $79 for the year as opposed to $99. And once again, no fees whatsoever. Have never seen tickets cheaper than this ever since I started using it. But enough of everything else. We need to go ahead and wrap up this video because it is taking forever. Thunder versus Celtics. Who is going to go ahead and win in this battle of heavyweights? The 2-1 seeds, the 2 favorites. Do the Celtics get a repeat? Do the Thunder finally get a championship? Who wins? I'm going to go with the Oklahoma City Thunder. I have to. It's my thing. I have to go with the Thunder here. It's really hard to repeat in the NBA, even though the Celtics were a juggernaut. They ran through the Eastern Conference. We haven't seen an NBA champion repeat in quite some time. Most of them don't even make it out of the second round. I think the Celtics are different. I think they get back to the finals. But in the end, the Thunder, who are younger, who are hungry, who have now some experience under their belt, they are stacked on both ends. They're one of the best offensive and defensive teams in the league. They have a top 5 player to get them over the edge. I think the Thunder go ahead and get it done, beat the Boston Celtics in, I'll say 7 games, with Shai Gilgeous-Alexander being the finals MVP and winning the finals. I think they're going to do it. I truly do. This isn't the bias talking. Picking the OKC Thunder to win in 7 games against Shai finals MVP. I picked it right last year. Let's see if I can do it again. And with that being said, those are my season predictions. I feel like this video was really long. I haven't cut it down yet, so we'll wait and see. But I hope you enjoyed. Let me know down below in the comments what your favorite prediction was. What was your least favorite? What did I get right? What did I get wrong? And just all your thoughts. I'm really excited about this season. It's a really fun one to predict. I'm amped. There's some awesome content on the way from me, from stuff I'm going to be doing over at Snapback Sports. If you didn't hear, I've signed on as Basketball Town with them. So I'm going to be doing a lot of stuff over there too. Some really cool videos. I'm going to be traveling to games more, getting to interact with y'all. It's going to be a lot of fun. I'm super, super excited. It's going to be the best season yet for me, for the channel, for the community that we've built here. Can't thank y'all enough for the support through the first few seasons I've been doing this, through this off season. It's going to be a great year. Leave a like and subscribe if you enjoyed. Hit the notification bell so you don't miss out on future videos. I appreciate y'all watching. I'll see y'all later. Real one, say it back.